Hello, this is Dr. Alan Ngim. Today I'm going to do a quick basic theory review of half steps and whole steps, and I'm going to show you how they're used to write scales. Now, a half step is simply the smallest interval on the piano. It's the smallest interval that we use in Western music. So it's from one note to the very next note. Sometimes we call this a minor second. So this interval, we'll learn a little bit later, is a minor second, and it will be abbreviated in this class with a lowercase m2. A whole step is skipping over one half step, so it's basically two half steps. And I'm going to write this like this. An uppercase M2 is also called a major second. So this is basically the distance skipping over one note on the keyboard. So what does this look like on the keyboard? Looks something like this. Okay, I'll just mark half steps. Look like this. They create the chromatic scale. And that's what it sounds like when I play those notes. Now whole steps, as you can see, if I skip over every other note, it's going to look like this. This is a whole tone scale. And this is used in music to create kind of a mysterious sound because, as you can see, because the distance between all the notes is exactly the same, there's no reference point to where the starting and the stopping point is in the scale, and it sounds a little bit like you're floating along. This was used a lot by Debussy and Ravel in Impressionism. It became very popular. Okay, so those are the two basic scales, the chromatic with half steps and the whole tone scale. But those are very specialized scales that we really don't use that often when we write a piece of music, maybe just in a little passage. The scales that we're used to using are the major and the minor scales. You may have learned how to create a major scale using whole steps and half steps, and this is what it looks like. So I'm going to start by just choosing a pitch, and let's say D major, for example. So let's say I want to start with D. Notice I use an uppercase D to indicate that this scale is going to be major, and I'm going to use whole and half steps. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to write the notes going up starting on D. So D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and D. Now for a major scale, using whole steps and half steps, there's a pattern. It's like this. Whole, whole, half, whole, whole, half. Notice that there's a kind of a symmetry here. Let me see if I did this right. Honestly, I don't normally write scales this way, and you will not be doing it this way either. Normally, going forward in Theory 1, you're going to be using key signatures and accidentals only for two forms of minor. But here it is, whole, whole, half. So let's take a look at what this means. Here, this is going to be a whole step, a half step here, a whole step. Oh, I think I left one out. Yeah, I did. Whole step, and a half step. So I left out one. In between these two patterns is a whole step. Okay, so let's take a look at this, how we would figure this out. So I'm going to start on D. D up a whole step is, and I think that it's like this. I don't really remember which is whole and which is half, but I'm going to mark the halves with a little slightly differently. Okay, so whole, E up a whole step is F sharp. So notice if I play this scale without changing anything. That's a nice Dorian modal sound, but we need to add accidentals. So E to F sharp. So sharps raise it up a half step. Now major scales will only have either sharps or flats. It won't have a combination. But here we go. Flats, as you know, lower the note a half step. Okay, here we are. So F sharp to G, that is a half step, and I hope I'm doing this not backwards, but I know that some places, maybe in the textbook, they mark it like this. Okay, so we have whole, whole, half. And then G to A, that is indeed a whole step. A to B is a whole step. Here, B to C, we know that's a half step, so that we need to change. Also, we need to raise up the next note to C sharp. Okay, and then finally C sharp to D, that is going to be a half step. Okay, so here's the whole scale. And then of course we could come back down. Let's take a look at what this looks like on the piano. Okay, so let's get rid of that and that. So D, E, let's get rid of that. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. So notice I can't write on this, but it's whole step, half step, and then there's two whole steps, whole, and a half at the end. So you may notice that the first part of the scale and the second part of the scale both have the same pattern, whole, half. And those two tetrachords, those two groups of four notes, are connected by a whole step. So it's whole, half, and then whole step, whole, half. And that's how you create the major scale. Now from there, we can create the minor scale. And I already mentioned that the minor scale, the natural minor scale, is the same exact collection of pitches, but instead of starting on, Do, if we want to look at it related, you might recognize later it'll be relative keys, but if we want to use these notes and create a minor scale, we could just start two steps down, like this. Okay, so we're going to go to La, using the same pitches, but now it's going to be from B, the relative minor, to B. So that's exactly the same pitches. All I did was I started two notes lower. And here's the major. And again, the minor. Now, that's using the relative, but what if you don't want to use the relative? What if we want to, say, make D minor? Okay, in this case, we are going to add accidentals, and we always have to lower the third degree of the scale to make minor. So the most important note to change in D would be this F sharp. The F sharp needs to go down a half step to create the minor scale. Okay, that's the first part of it. Now the next two scale degrees that could change are 6 and 7, La and T. La and T are variable in the minor scale. They sometimes are up and they are sometimes down. So here you see La T is B and C sharp, but we can lower these for natural minor. B to B flat and C sharp to C natural. And there you have the natural minor scale. It sounds like this. This is D natural minor. We could also raise up the 7th degree, C back to C sharp. This would create the harmonic minor. And then, jazz people, maybe close one ear, we can use melodic minor. Now melodic minor in classical music, it's only the natural minor changed going up. going down, it's exactly like natural minor. So maybe you could think of melodic minor as having a major scale ascending with the exception of 3. 3, again, is always flatted, may. So I'm not going to move that F to F sharp. No, if we move it to F sharp, it's going to sound like a major scale. But ascending, I can make the upper part back into a major scale. So I can use, la, ti, do there, and listen to what it sounds like ascending. The upper part sounds just like major, so, la, ti, do. But the bottom part sounds like minor. So it's like kind of a half and half. That's the melodic minor. And then going down, we would change these two for classical music. And this helps the singer not to go flat when descending and not to go sharp when ascending. Or it actually helps him to sing on pitch a little bit. It's the natural tendency of the voice. Returning back to harmonic minor, remember harmonic minor looks like this. And you can see now, with the way this looks, if you look at the second and the upper part of the scale, we have a kind of a big gap there. That's that augmented second. So that interval, equivalent to a minor third, very challenging for singers to find it. I mean, you hear it here and you could sing it probably, but if you're in a choir and you're singing a part and you encounter this, it does not look like this in the music. It looks like a step, but you have to sing that big gap. And I don't know how many times I've been in a rehearsal and I could just see the choir struggling to sing that big gap there. So in your writing, it's actually an interval to avoid. And most augmented intervals should be avoided because they are quite difficult to sing. So especially if you're writing vocal music, unless you want it, you intend it for an advanced musician, I would stay away from that. If you're writing for a high school choir, maybe you can put a couple of those in there, but don't put a lot of them because the choir will struggle. And certainly for anything below a high school choir, that gap there is going to cause a lot of problems in rehearsal, and your piece may not sound right if you make the singer jump over that. Okay. Let's go back to what this looks like on paper. So back here, I'm going to write now the minor scales using this D major scale. I'll remind you again that this is not the way we're going to be writing them, and in the homework, even if it asks you to do it this way, in Theory 1, don't. Use the key signature and that for the minors. The only reason you would do this is if your piece is actually in a major key and only goes into minor temporarily. But if your piece is actually in minor, you should use the key signature for minor and sustain that throughout the piece. It's just much easier for the musicians to read. They won't have to negotiate a bunch of accidentals, especially on la and ti, and try to guess what it is that note is supposed to be. But again, this is just an exercise in seeing how the scale looks starting from major. So I'm going to take the scale above that we have, D major, and I'm not even going to talk about trying to remember what these intervals are, like the whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half pattern in minor. Honestly, I don't think this way, and it would be very confusing for me to try to rattle off the half and whole steps for the 3 different forms of minor. But here's what it happens. Okay, so here's the major scale, like this. Okay, this is D major. Oops. Well, almost D major. Like this. And now I'm going to lower. Okay, so here we're going to lower 3. The little hat up here. So this bit, when I do this means that this is the scale degree, the number in the scale. So remember that this has to be lowered. Sometimes I'll abbreviate this and I'll just put a little arrow like this, 3, like that. So if you see this, that means that I'm moving the third degree of the scale down a half step. So since this is sharped, I'm going to just make it natural by erasing. Okay? Now, we're going to write natural minor first. So natural minor, I have to lower, here's that little abbreviation, lower 6 and 7. You already know that we're always going to lower 3 if we're starting from major. So 6, I'll put a little arrow here, and 7 need to be lowered. 6 is a B, we're going to make it B flat. 7 is C sharp, we're just going to make it natural, like that. So this is it. This is the D natural minor scale. And it sounds like this. Okay, pretty easy, but again, don't write like this unless you're already in D major and then you're going to D minor, okay? I'll write the other two forms now and you can compare, and then I'll write it using a key signature and we'll stop there. So let me erase the major scale, which you can see up here. Let's get rid of this and get rid of this. And notice that again, these D minor scales, it's a little bit different now because I'll warn you that if you write using accidentals, you could end up with a mix of flats and sharps, which I think we're going to see right now. So again, this is harder for the musician a little bit, at least, and it's easier to make a mistake in writing than using the key signature. So here is the major scale again, D major, because I'm going to start from that and then I'm going to change it. Alright, you already know that if we want to make this into harmonic minor, I need to lower 3. Okay, so flat 3, and also flat 6. Now you probably can see how this can get a little bit confusing because you may not remember what you're supposed to do, and maybe you flatted, you don't remember what you flatted. Okay, so all I have to do is add that there. So notice we have a mix now, flat and a sharp. This is the harmonic D minor scale, D minor harmonic. And you remember how we had that big gap. I'm going to highlight this for you. It's here. That gap, what's really bad about this, as you look at it on the paper, you know, forget the accidentals for a second. Just look at this. Okay, when a musician is sight reading quickly, this looks like a step, but it's actually sort of a leap because it's that augmented second. Okay, so this is like dangerous for musicians. It just is hard to read. It looks like a step, but they have to sing kind of a leap. So again, lay to T should be avoided normally, and if you do write it in your music, only very, very sparingly. Okay, now the last one. Let me erase this part. Whoops. Now, I should qualify this a little bit. Let's say you're composing for instruments or you're writing a score for something where you're just playing it on a keyboard. Well, feel free. Write as many augmented intervals as you like. You know, go crazy because instruments, they just press a button, right? It doesn't really matter whether you write something like that. But it does matter for reading purposes a little bit. So, okay, the last scale we need to take a look at in comparison to the major. So, and that is the melodic. Now, I won't write, well, maybe I will. I'll write both the ascending and descending forms because there are two different versions of this. Ascending, of course, is going to be that kind of mix of major and minor. And then descending will be the natural minor. So I'm leaving a little bit of extra space here so that I could put the accidentals in. When you write melodic minor, make a little space next to 6 and 7. Okay, so first of all, flat 3, always, that's going to carry through. So I'm going to get rid of the sharp. Now, ascending, we have to lower 6, like this. Okay. Sorry, what am I doing? See, this is why I don't do this way. Ascending, it is like the major. So it looks like this. Ascending sounds like this. Descending is the natural minor. So here we have to lower 7 and lower 6. Now if you're confused as I am, you can breathe a sigh of relief because this is not how we're going to write the scales. But again, this is how you can think if you're moving from major to minor. Notice in this little area, we have to be careful with 6 and 7 to add the accidentals. There is another way of doing this. Rather than, putting the accidentals in on one side or the other, we can use a bar line to cancel out the accidentals. But we don't have a key signature, so we don't do that here. Let me just show you once how you use a key signature now. No, I'm not going to do that. That's okay. That's it for today, because actually if you want to see how to write the scales using a key signature, there's another video for that. So I hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next video.